Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Blunt. I am a professional dominatrix based out of New York City, and I am here today with Dasha Bond. Dasha, I would love if you would introduce yourself.
Sure, I am Dasha Bond. I am also a professional dominatrix. I mostly session in New York City. I'm also a content creator and sometimes fetish model.
Amazing. And I think one of my favorite things that we have in common is that we are both hardcore mommy doms. And I'd love to start by asking you, what does being a mommy dom mean to you, and how does it inform your domination style?
Yeah, actually, it's exactly how I describe my domination style. I always say I'm a mommy dom. I think what it means to me is this like beautiful like marriage of like nurturer, disciplinarian, and like coercive figure, and also like seductress. And when you put all those things together and you just have this, this dominant figure who you want to like take care of you and also ruin your life.
I mean, that's what a mother's job is, right? It's like a lot
Literally.
of care and like fuck you up for life.
Exactly.
It's perfect, the perfect archetype. Yeah, I feel like it's such like a sweet balance between
Mhm.
nurture and torture, and like a
Yeah.
very like it's like feels like a very subtle type of torture. I feel like mommy doms can be more where it's not just like the nurturance time, like, oh, you're my baby boy and I'll give you whatever you want. Like, no, that's not my, I don't think that's either of our style, but like the
Yeah.
deep psychological play that
Yeah.
can really come into effect because like no one fucks you up like mommy fucks you up.
Exactly.
Let's be real. Everyone's
And
down to call their partner daddy like 10 years before they're calling their partner mommy.
it's true. And it's become such a trend. And the thing is, though, I remember like this is something that really spoke to me. And so when I started seeing other people doing it, I'm like, you're doing it wrong. That's not how you do it. It's like you have to be both. And it's so intrinsic to me. Like it's just who I am. And I love it. Like no matter how hard I try, I can never turn off this like nurturing side of me, but at the same time I have this just like deep insatiable like sadist inside of me as well. Like it's both.
I love it. I mean, get you a mommy who can do both. I am totally just picturing you now as like a mommy at the dominatrix park being like, I would never treat my son like that. That's not how you treat a baby. That's not how you treat a little one.
Honestly, I'm always thinking about that too. Like power dynamics are always in my mind,
Yeah.
always. And anytime I see anybody else or I'm seeing other people dominate people, I'm like, that's not how I would do it. I would get them like I would really get them hooked. You gotta really like get them latched on. You have to seduce them.
Latched
Get
on.
latched on exactly. And then all of a sudden you just like hit them where it hurts. Like right when they're as turned on as you can possibly get, mommy takes over. Like
In this
I love
household, we breastfeed for life.
it. Exactly. Yeah, no, and I mean, listen, we both have pretty big boobies,
Yeah,
right? So,
it
I
works.
mean,
I'm curious, do you remember like the first time you were called mommy, or like the first time
yeah,
mommy as a
we might have talked about this on the previous interview,
oh,
but I don't remember. I was having a threesome. I had like just turned 18, like I mean like a week prior to that. And I was in this threesome and there was no established power dynamic, nothing. And all of a sudden, we're starting to kiss and then they just both look up at me with these like puppy dog eyes. Like it was so natural. And then they just started calling me mommy. And then the whole thing was just like so kinky. We didn't really communicate any of those things, and probably because we were all young. But, there was like already like sucking on toes, pegging, and like anal, and like people like these two subs calling me mommy, and it was really beautiful. I remember leaving that and I was like, I guess I'm mommy, yeah, like that makes sense. And it
sense.
just made me feel really good. And ever since then, I was like, I'm mom.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like because it came to you so early, and like I think mommy is something that came to me a little bit later. I started playing with like daddy archetypes, and it felt fun and interesting, but it didn't resonate with me the same way. I
Yeah.
like daddy because of what it did to other people, and I like
Yeah.
mommy for like what it does for me. It feels like much more aligned with my sexuality. And like for me, like I can go both ways because like I'm also very interested in power, and if there's like a specific thing that gets into a submissive's head, like I am down to like go like pedal to the metal gun, like let's see
Mhm.
how fucked up this makes you. But
Yes.
mommy is just like so near and dear to my heart. And what I think I love most about it is like how eager my little ones are to please mommy in a way that
I
wasn't quite
agree.
the same with daddy. You know, like they want
Mhm.
attention from daddy, but like it's not pleasing daddy in the same way. And so the like how eager they are to please and like what they will do and like just how fucked up that like divine attention from mommy makes people, I think
I
is just
agree.
like, such a beautiful way to explore power dynamics.
It is. And honestly, it ends up becoming most of the time more perverted, which I love.
Yes.
But I do love Daddy, but it's a different feel. And I feel like it's only like part of what mommy is. And so I feel like you're always like
Mom is
missing.
everything.
Mommy is everything. Daddy's just like hard and like fucks you hard and like, it's just like really like it's a little less sensual to me, but I feel powerful for sure. But
Yeah.
like even if I'm meeting someone and they just like immediately start referring to me as like mistress or goddess, like I don't feel the same enthusiasm or eagerness as someone who just like immediately comes to you as mommy.
Yeah.
And it's so sweet, and you just immediately you see the change. Like when someone refers to me as mistress, like a lot of the times they can be straight faced, maybe they're not turned on, but if someone calls me mommy, like
So
they're puppy dog eyes, they're already there, like they're slowly already entering subspace. Like it's just so beautiful, and it's the dynamic is so established already. Like I already know I have them hooked, and like that's what I love about it. But with mistress, daddy, even like it feels just a little bit less intimate to me. But
mm,
I love also just going all in. If something really turns someone on, like I'm immediately going to go that direction because I also just like love finding those little things that get someone. And sometimes subs don't communicate that like one thing or they don't even know yet. And then you start to find it
yeah.
and then you're like, that's the direction, that's the path I'm going to take because
Yeah.
I am now like they're gonna think about this forever.
Oh my
Like
God.
and
This
I
is
love that.
reminding me, I did this scene that turned into an interrogation scene, which was not how it is set out, but
Yeah,
I could like I feel like with like 99% of people that I play with, like I can find that connection, I can find that hook. And this was just like one person that I'm like, oh, all of my tricks are not working. And like I
yeah,
don't know why, because like based on like their inquiry, like we should be like so aligned. And
yes.
like it just like I had like this moment of like, I'm not saying the right thing. Like, and he's
Mm-hmm.
not gonna tell me what it is. And it turned into an interrogation scene where I was like, okay, listen, like, I get that you want me to be a mind reader. You want mommy to read your mind, but there's something you have to tell mommy because I'm not wasting my time playing this fucking game with you. Like, you're going to give me the information that mommy wants so that mommy can use it in the appropriate way to dole out
Exactly.
punishment. And like after like 5 minutes of interrogation, he like said the word, which it must have been like whore, and I was calling him slut, but like whore was a word that like
Yeah,
did and like within like 30 seconds after saying the word, the scene like completely shifted. It was like
yeah,
transformative. And I'm like, oh, like if you know the word, if you know like your
yeah.
things, if you know like it's shoes and like the word slut, like give someone that ammo. It's like such
Exactly.
for both of you.
It's really important to find those things out, and I can't even. I mean, I can very much imagine the frustration you were feeling when that happens because if there's ever a time that I'm doing something and I'm like, we're not bonding.
Mommy
Where
wants to bond.
mommy
Mommy
wants to
wants to
bond.
be close.
And it's like, mommy's not bonding. What is wrong? Like, I get so angry inside, and I'm very, calm and collective. So the second that I realize it, I'm like, we're switching.
Yeah.
That's not working. You're not telling me something. And I feel the exact same way. I actually had someone recently though, they gave me this like little bit of ammo of like, because they love sissification, and the name that they used was someone that they had a crush on that rejected them.
Oh, hot.
And I was just like, the fact that you can give that to me, like, this is perfect. Like humiliation, for example, like, it just doesn't work, in my opinion, if you don't know this person well. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're just calling them names or whatever. And it's like, sure, that can be maybe a turn on. But if you want me to hit you where it hurts, like, we're going to have to get to know each other,
Yeah.
and you're going to have to trust me.
Yeah.
And it was such a beautiful session. And he's actually a virgin of mine, and I get a lot of virgins, and I love them.
I
And
love that
I
for you.
love them. Yeah. Um,
I
go
would
ahead.
love to, I feel like you just hit on something that I find so interesting and is like such a deeply held belief of mine, that humiliation only works if it's real. And
Yeah.
like it's like, sure, like you can jerk off while I'm saying like these like canned responses from like
Yeah.
femdom POV porn,
Yeah.
but like if you want to be like altered, if you want
Mhm.
to be changed, if you want to like never be the same in your life and like transform, like you have to be vulnerable. You have to get to know
Yeah.
someone, and you have to like share that information in a way that can be like wielded like a weapon. And I think that humiliation, the like best humiliation that like I've done in scenes has been with people who see me over and over again and who have built
Exactly.
that trust, and that it's personal. I just had a very sweet submissive who requested a custom humiliation clip that would, she's like, I want to watch this over the weekend when I have time to recover so I can like have a full breakdown. And like, you've known me for 2 years, do
Yeah.
your worst. And I'm like so excited
Yeah.
to make this custom, because it's going to be devastating in a
Yeah.
way that just like canned humiliation like never will touch on those, because our like humiliation I feel like is so based on our lived experiences, which are so diverse and so unique to an individual. So like what I say to one person isn't going to even touch another person,
Yeah.
whereas
Totally.
with this person over here on my left, like ruin their life.
Exactly. No, it's a really beautiful thing, and there's nothing to me that's more important than, like, really cultivating my relationships with my sons. And I think it comes back to me being a mommy dom, but it doesn't matter if I've known someone for only a couple of days or if I've known them for years. Like, if there's ever a time where I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be the right person for them, or if they stop talking to me, like, it really does make me a bit sad. And, like, I can obviously like regulate my emotions and like move on, but I really do have this deep care for my subs. And I think the only way that you can make this like beautiful scene is if you get to the point where you know them so well that they feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable, and then you have this ammo. Like,
Yeah.
and
It's
they love it. And I
mommy
just,
too. It's like right, like the archetype of mommy or like mother, maybe more like mother,
yeah,
is like you come home, you're there for like 15 minutes, and your mother says the most devastating thing, and you're like never going home again in like a way
exactly,
that only mommy can do.
exactly.
And it's just because she wants to feel close to you.
I know. It's so sweet though. Like, it just, nothing makes me happier than someone like when I'm like realizing that they're starting to be vulnerable with me, and then they say something really, important, and then I'm like, I'll keep that for later.
Yeah. Our mommy spank bank is just like little pieces, little morsels of information that you
Yeah.
revealed when you were vulnerable and didn't even realize it, that will take
Yeah.
out like months later to
Mhm.
to come back and get you.
No, exactly. I love that.
One of my submissives works for a large tech company, and I always tease him about like built obsolescence and about like how I like make him use his competitors' tools, being like, oh, it's just better designed, like, and I'm
I
just
love
like,
that.
And he's like, this is so specifically painful.
Yeah,
Very.
I mean, you can't get better. And that's, I think a lot of the times just like so natural to us as well. It's like getting this like a streak of like creativity coming out of nowhere, which I think other people are just like not as good at doing. And you're like, oh, that's really important to you. How can I use it against you? Like,
I love that that's how both of our brains work. You're like, oh, thank you for sharing.
yeah.
Mommy will put that away for later.
I
Um,
mean, listen, I have a Slavic mother, so I feel like I'm very qualified.
Amazing. One thing you said that is that a lot of the people who see you are virgins, and I would love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Um, yeah, they're just like one of my favorite people to play with. Also, I feel like it means a lot to me when someone comes to me and they have had virtually no like intimate experience and they have taken the time to really research and find someone who they think will be really compatible with them. I also think there's something so hot about someone being like, I am waiting. I've realized I am so into femdom and I need to make sure that my first experience is good because I'm like you'll get the best experience of your life and it's like how you'll spend the rest of your life chasing that like and I
You
love
have a good first sexual experience too. It's like
mm-hmm. And I'm like your first like any kind of experience is me like I am so honored like honestly I
I
love
definitely thought you were gonna say I'm so happy for you.
that too I'm like I'm jealous I wish that was mine
The dream.
exactly I've definitely masturbated to that thought.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I love the most about them is just how much of a blank canvas they are.
Yeah.
And I think about conditioning a lot and like getting them to have these particular ways that they're going to go into any kind of sexual intimacy, like from there on, being like, oh, but Dasha kissed like that. Like, I love that. It's like you're not doing it like that. Like
You're
that's
not
not
like my mommy.
like mommy touches me like this. Like you're not mommy. I love that. But also playing with them like a lot of the times any virgin that I've seen, they lack some kind of confidence in their sexual abilities, which is, obviously comes with experience. And I really love like disarming them and making them feel very comfortable and get to the point where they can go from this like person who just like is not entirely sure like how to do any of this and then get to this point where at the end they're like I know what I like and you helped me explore that and that makes me feel so rewarded honestly like I really do love this job like it gets me into this like altered state that I've never experienced otherwise um and that's just my favorite thing like I have so many little virgins in my life from my little domestic sub to like a lot of my clients like
Virgins. To be determined. Uh, I it's so interesting. I feel like the virgins that I've gotten have all been trans women who are exploring like feminization with me and are being like fucked as a woman for the first
mm,
time, which is like such an exciting experience
okay.
to share with someone.
Yeah.
Um, and or like I guess like BDSM virgins too. I get
Yeah.
quite a few of which I feel like it's just like always so exciting to get to be someone's first. And I think it goes back to that idea of like what we crave is that vulnerability. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's nothing more vulnerable than like trusting someone to guide you where you've literally never gone
Hmm.
before. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Something about that is very, very beautiful. And I also love when I had a particular sub who it was his first time anything. He's never been kissed, nothing. And his first experience, like, I went into this thinking, like, we're going to go somewhat light and, like, have this fun experience. And by the end of it, like, this man was so bruised up. Like he took so much.
love
Like he's
it.
just such a little masochist. And he's just been waiting for him to like flourish. I just He's like, he's been waiting, and I loved it. Like it was the best thing ever. Just seeing how I was like, I would keep doing things, and he's like, I don't know. He's like, I'm not really feeling it like more, and and that also that pisses me off so much. The second a sub tells me that, I'm like, oh really? Like I'm like, I'm gonna make you feel it.
I
It's
had
similar.
I had the
It's
opposite experience with my sub who you met. So this is
oh yeah.
take us on a journey where so we met because I reached out to you because I was like, you're so good at TikTok. Like, is there anything that I can show you? We can do a skill share. And we wound up doing a TikTok. We did like the shadow challenge or something like that. And then we did blood play with one of my submissives, and like your face was one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen. And like, I just remember it so vividly. And she was also like, I was Dasha's first. And so she really enjoyed.
Really? Oh, that's so sweet.
She was seeing you like post more like of your interest in blood play stuff. But I was talking to her last night and she was like, I've always been told like my whole life that I'm such a masochist. And she was like serving someone else. And like, and she's like, and with you, I feel like such a little bitch. I thought it was so funny. And I'm sure it's like some
Oh,
of like, like moving through and like feeling your feelings more and
yeah.
feeling more embodied. I feel like it's like
Yes.
so many different things, but I it really made it was like the complete opposite of the story that
Yes.
you just told, and I was like, ah, yes.
It was honestly, it was so much fun. Like it was such a beautiful experience. And every time that I talk to people about it, I'm like, look, here's a picture. And it's like I stapled her tip to her arm. It's like, look at me. I'm so proud of myself.
I'm so proud it's on my fridge. Look at my
Right. I'm gonna print it out as a Polaroid and put it on my fridge. Be like, I love that though. It was such a beautiful experience for me, and ever since, like, I always knew that I had this like love for it. It actually started from, it was Vex Ashley's company, A Four Chambered Heart, and I was watching this one video, and they're just covered in blood, and they're fucking. And I think if anything will get you into blood, it's that, because it's just the right amount of like, oh, but it's not too extreme. And so I just remember watching this and I was like, I want to be covered in blood and fuck. Like that looks fun. And then at the end, you have this like mix of like there's a little bit of like pissing and cum. And I'm just like such a slut for fluids in general. Like I love them. And so watching that, I just remember I was like so entranced, and I was like, I need this in my life. It's like I
That's
need
amazing. Their content is gorgeous. It's something I
it.
always like encourage people to watch, and like definitely. I feel like I've been seeing so much more blood play that people are
Yes.
doing, which is like super and more mommy. I was just tweeting about this. I feel like
Yeah.
so many more people are calling themselves mommy as like their honorific, and
Yes.
like everyone and their fucking mother is like doing blood play. And I'm like, this used to be like I've been working for like 15 years, and like some of like the first skills that I learned were like medical play. I like
Yeah.
when I was like 18 or 19 at the place that I trained, I was like sounding like the like headmaster of the space and like sewing it around his urethra and
Yeah.
like sewing someone's like cock to someone's cunt. And I'm like, these are like my early dom
Yeah.
experiences, and like just wouldn't see it. I feel like there were like the heavy medical doms who would do some like cool fucked up stuff, and everyone would
Yeah.
be like, yeah. And now I feel like everyone's like, here's my cool fucked up medical stuff. So it's very
Yes.
interesting to see.
Which I really love that, because like I mean, you'll see here on my like Twitter, and you'll see me like posting a strap on pic, and like everyone loves it, and I'm like, okay, well, now you followed me, so here's me talking about blood, and they're like, oh, I thought she just pegs. And I love that. Like I love getting. I'm like, you have to have both. Like the duality is there. And I absolutely love that. But I have a sub of mine who I'd love to like carve little shapes in him, and so now he just have he has hearts all over his back, like carved in there, and I love it. And he loves it, like he loves looking at it. And he feels like it, like all always scars.
Yeah.
So he just has these like permanent little hearts on his back. And I remember like someone saw it and he just like gave like the dumbest response. And he was like, "Oh, I fell," like something like that.
Oh, I cut something really gorgeous in an ex of mine's chest, and his son asked about it, and he's like, "Oh, a fairy cut me," and I was like, "Ah, not a lie, like it
Yeah.
works." And I'm like, now your child's gonna be scared of fairies, but that's not my business.
The problem is, like, now it's like all I think about. Anytime I think about owning someone, especially when it gets to this point where I just feel so connected to
Yeah.
them, I'm like, you need my initials in you. Like always like that. Which happens with your initials too. So
Oh, I think it's so fun. Whenever I go to text you, I'm like, I'm texting myself. Mommy for
yeah.
mommy, DB for DB.
No, I love it. I'm like, we can co-own.
Yeah, we should
Co-parenting.
someone. We should like. I feel like we are overdue for like lesbian cuckolding domination co-ownership of
Honestly.
someone. I feel like we
Yeah,
just ruin generations of lives.
exactly. I completely agree. It's co-parenting. You know, two
Yeah.
mommies just taking care of their little baby. I love it.
So funny. Yeah. So if anyone's listening, it's time. It's definitely
Yeah.
time.
You need to be owned by two gorgeous mommies.
Yeah, it's perfect. Like what else are you doing with your life? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Mhm.
By the end of it, you need DB.
Yeah, DB.
Yes.
Like DB plus DB in a heart.
Aw.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I
I
like
tweeted about it. Sorry, I tweeted about it, and I actually wrote, I was like, you need your initials in me. And someone was like, oh, I have a ton of tattoos. I'm like, I'm not talking about tattoos.
yeah. Just like straight to the flesh.
Yeah.
In I like carving ridiculous things into subs. On one of them I carved Basic Bitch was one of my favorites.
That was right before
Yeah,
we did stuff.
I
It was,
was-
yes. I
um,
remember seeing it. And I was like, oh.
that was such a fun one. And then I also carved on her. I play with her without a safe word. We have like a very developed. She's been serving me for like 3.5 years or something like that, and just like a very like deep 24/7 dynamic. She's my
Yeah.
personal submissive. She does a ton of service for me. And we don't play with a safe word. We have like a CNC
Yeah.
total power exchange dynamic. And I was teaching her a lesson and carved no means nothing into her back. And I posted it on Twitter, and there was an interesting response. Most people loved it, and then it went to like the wrong part of Twitter where they're like, "Oh, this is horrible," and I'm like, "Y'all, she was coming like while I was carving this into her and had like been begging me to." Like,
Yeah.
I just think it's so interesting when it is taken into like the wrong part of
Yeah.
Twitter,
No,
but
it's beautiful. Honestly, I love it. I had a similar response where I have a Jesus dildo, and
yeah,
I did a video where Jesus takes my virginity, and so I'm dressed in like bridal lingerie, and I have the veil, and I like posted it, and I was like, it was like Jesus is always in me. You know what I mean? Like I was saying something along those lines. Like it's probably wittier than that. And then I posted it, and a bunch of people are like, oh, like you Satanist, blasphemy, blah blah blah. And I was like, yeah, that's the point.
you're like, yes, hashtag blasphemy. That's so funny.
Yeah, it just ends up on the wrong side of Twitter. It happens.
It does happen. It does happen. I feel like something that we also talked about having in common is like our love for objectification and objectification as a form of power dynamic. And it's one of my favorite forms, I think. And
Yeah.
before we talk about objectification, you mentioned something about mommy play bringing you into an altered state that I wanted to go
Yeah.
back to, because I think that when we talk about altered states in BDSM, we're so often talking about subspace, when like where we bring our subs and like this like gorgeous flow state that comes for our submissive, like everything for our submissives, right? Of course, we're such pleasers. And I think it's like so, and like just like aftercare, when we talk about aftercare, most of the time, like 95% of the time, we're talking about like how to take care of a submissive afterwards, not something that a submissive could be doing. You know, like when I play with my submissives, part of their aftercare is giving me a massage as like a connective way of like coming together and like regulating. Uh,
Yes.
and so I think the mommy space, the like mommy headspace, this like juicy, flowy space, I think is something I would love to talk to you about because I do feel
Sure.
like we don't talk enough about in kink community about
I
like
agree.
dom space or like a more dominant headspace and like what that flow space is like of like being able to enter a space and like have your way with someone and like moving from their feedback and like
Yeah.
just literally I really think of it as like a flow space and like quite literally as an altered brain space where we're like playing
I
with
agree.
plasticity and it doesn't just happen for the submissive like when there is that good chemistry and when you are playing with someone where you're like really attuned with there is this opportunity for transformation on both sides and
Yeah.
I'd love if you could talk a little bit about like what mommy space is for you and like what that
Yeah.
like altered state is.
Yeah, so I'm completely sober. Like I don't consume like even caffeine. I don't drink, I don't anything. And I've found that I'm so addicted to this and the way that it makes me feel. And it's just honestly nothing else can get me there. And I'm a little cancer. So I just feel my emotions so deeply and I always have. And so when I'm in this space, like regardless of even sometimes how attached I am to this person, like I tend to go into Dom space like pretty quickly. And I also, and like we were talking about with mommies, like I love taking on all of the behind the scenes things that like subs don't have to think about. So I make this the most beautiful thing ever. And I have so much joy in it. Like just doing my makeup, making myself look so intimidating and unattainable. I love it. Like it makes me feel very happy. And I want them to come there being like, she's just this perfect person where it's like, you know, there's a lot of like time and energy behind that. Or like when I'm pegging someone and they're loving it, but I'm getting tired, but I'm not stopping. Like I love those things.
Wedding.
I'm like, mommy's putting in a lot of work in this that you behind the scenes that you don't get to see because I want this to be perfect. Like I really I love the way that it transforms me. And like I start to even feel it like the way that like my entire brain, it's just like always like it gets so calm and everything is just like all my senses are so heightened. And I think that also is what makes me like a better Dom because when I'm doing it, like the slightest change in mood, the slightest change in body language, like everything, I notice it immediately. And I love that feeling. Like there's nothing that can get better. And I really can't describe it in any other way other than like I feel high. Like I feel so, so good. And by the end of it, I agree with you when it comes to like aftercare and things, especially if someone's ever penetrated me, because I don't bottom super often, but if they penetrate me, like I feel like I definitely need some aftercare. And occasionally there'll be some subs who just like want to kind of like run away after something happens, or like a session ends or a scene ends. And sometimes that will leave me a tiny bit hurt because I need to come down properly, and that mostly only happens to me if someone's penetrating me, but again it doesn't happen as often. But yeah, that aftercare is super important for both people because we're both feeling like an exchange of energy. And so I want to feel at the end of it like I'm taking care of you, but I take care of my stuffies because they take care of me. Like that is just like
Reciprocity, I feel like,
it is.
is so important. And I think
Mhm.
like aftercare conversations should like involve like that reciprocity of like what
Yeah.
do you need and then the submissive needs to ask their dom what they need too and
Yeah.
I like for me I feel like I can like fall into a state of hyper attunement that feels like really high like I was doing I do drugs but
Yes.
I also feel really high in sessions and like there are a few people that I play with where I'm like, am I rolling? Like I feel like I just like
Exactly.
of ecstasy and like like to be able to do that just through connection, attunement, vulnerability, and like somatics, I feel like is such a powerful thing to be able to accomplish together. And
Yeah.
it's not like for me in an ideal session, like I am also moved. I am like moving with you. We are moving together.
Yeah.
We are co-creating something. Like I am
Yeah.
not just doing something to you for you. I
Yeah.
am doing something to you for me to like bring me into that state. And I think something that's also that you were talking about that I find so interesting is like I definitely top more often than I bottom, but like uh, I think we're talking about like sexually here with like
Yeah.
penetration, not like the kink top and bottom. Um, but I feel like people, there's been so long, I feel like more DOMs are doing content creation and like porn and like full service stuff now than like when I was coming up as a DOM like 15
Yeah.
years ago. And it's just so interesting to me when people are like, oh, like if you're being penetrated, like you're somehow submissive because like
Yeah.
for like I love using people like a human dildo. Like there is
Exactly.
nothing that I love more than like taking my pleasure, like coming over and over again, and like
I
of course
agree.
I don't get to come. And
Yeah.
like for me, like there is nothing submissive about being penetrated. It's just like
I
an
agree.
like misogynistic trope that somehow like being penetrated makes you more feminine or weaker or more submissive or
Yeah.
like con-
Yes.
controlled or like it's like the like I don't know, like I feel like any activity can be done from either end of like the D
100%.
and
100%.
is represented that way. I have this one clip that I have with Owen Gray that I send out
I
on
know what you're talking about,
my
and I love it.
oh, thank you. It was such a fun clip because he also doesn't really do like kink stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'd love to shoot with you, but like I don't like fuck like you fuck in your other clips. Are you like open to it? And he was like super down, and it was really fun to be able to like to dominate him and like this like really like gentle form of domination of like using him for my pleasure, like teasing
Yeah.
him, like not letting him come, like making him clean up after himself. And like I for me it's like that's the type of sex that I have in my personal life.
I
And
agree.
it felt like much less performative than some of the femdom porn that I
I agree.
see or
Yeah. Same.
that I do. And I'm like I feel like it's still like somewhat taboo, although people don't talk as much shit about you anymore
Yeah.
than they did like 10 years ago when
Yeah.
you do that kind of porn.
I
But
agree.
that's so powerful. Like
It
all of my
is.
sexuality is so powerful, and like I want to use all that I want to at my disposal in order to control you.
I agree. And, before we became friends, and it was you and two other people who just really inspired me in the community. Like, I loved watching their content and, like, just the way that they would speak and the authenticity. And those two people happen to be, like, some of my closest friends in the industry. And it makes me so happy. And I have now taken a lot of pride in, like, shifting the narrative for a lot of people by doing things that might be construed as submissive, but me doing it, mommy's doing it, therefore it can't be submissive. And I really love changing that narrative of showing like all kinks are neutral and it just depends on who's doing it and how you're approaching it. And I love doing that, and I love making people see that like it's not about that. And especially because I'm someone who like I peg a lot, so I don't want people to think that like you're in any way like more inferior because you're being pegged. No, you're inferior because your mommy's little toy. Like that's it.
Hugged by mommy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I love being able to introduce people to that and making sure that they have the right notions in their mind and that they are, not feeling in any way like less confident about what they're doing or embarrassed by what they're doing, and making sure that they understand like that I'm doing this from love and care for the person, and I want them to make sure that no, you're not seen as feminine or weaker just because you are doing a particular act. And I love that. Just like for a while I also felt like if I was bottoming that it made me a little less like dominant. And I love bottoming. Like, how can you not? You know, I was like, I have a hole, I want to use it. Like, and so for me, like those things, like introducing it with submissives, also helped me and my BDSM journey. And as someone who, like, honestly, have never felt shame in their life, um, I really love being able to approach with other people and show them these kinks and being like, you can do this and not feel one way or the other about it. It's really beautiful. And sometimes I want to get fucked. Sometimes they want to get fucked. Like, it's just what it is. Like, I love it.
I remember Katie Diamond, who is a boot black and I think like a former international Miss Leather person,
Mhm.
was giving a boot blacking lesson and was like, you know, like the boot black doesn't have to be the submissive, and like gave a demo of how to like boot black as a top, and it was so hot and like so
Yeah.
handsy. And I just like I think about that for like every single activity. And I think it's so limiting to think that a specific activity is inherently submissive and like,
Yeah.
right? It's like if a dom wants to wear a collar, like fuck it, like great. Like I feel like there's just so much judgment in
Yeah.
community about like how other people are what other people are doing is somehow like less dominant instead of
Yeah.
like exactly what they want to be doing. Like for me, what feels less dominant is not fucking someone you want to fuck because you think that it somehow makes you weaker or more
Yeah.
like I know people
Right.
who have told me like, oh, like I wish that I could do that, and I'm like, bitch, you can.
Yeah, of course you
Like
can.
you have to get over your shit of like
Agree.
which is like not just your shit, it's like what's been conditioned
Yes.
to you to make like from like a huge like grand scan like societal level to
Yeah.
make you feel that penetration is somehow more submissive than penetrating someone else because of heteronormative norms. It's like you just have you can do it. Like I feel like the
Yeah.
most dominant thing you can do is whatever you want within within your sub's boundaries, you know? Like
I agree. No, I agree. And I pretty quickly came to that conclusion myself. And ever since then, like, I make porn that I think is more beautiful. I think I have deeper connections with my subs. And I think it gets to the point where I feel like I can educate them better and make sure that they are having, the proper relationship with BDSM. Because I've had people come to me who've had, traumatic experiences in the past with someone who was a bad Dom and, just ended up leaving a mark on them. And I love making sure that I can, you know, reframe that in narrative and keep their love for BDSM, because it's something that, I think if you have like a really healthy relationship with your sexuality, like it shows through the rest of your life. Like when you are, happy with the intimacy you have at home or in the bedroom, like you are going to be, I think, a more confident individual. So I
yeah,
just,
I feel like it translates to and also it's just like that confidence and that like feeling of empowerment of like deserving to have your needs met, whether or not those
yeah,
needs are being humiliated to the point where you
yeah,
like don't deserve needs. But like I think that it's what we do offers such a space of transformation that like one of like the taglines of one of my many websites I've had over the years is like was a kinky yoga website, and it was something like taking devotion like off of the mat and into the dungeon. And I was like talking
yeah,
about how you can bring a kink practice into or how you can bring a yoga practice like into a devotional kink practice. And I think it like it took it was really interesting for people because it was like branding that was a lot lighter. It was taken in light at a time when like everyone was taking like studio lit dungeon photos. And so many people contacted me talking about like how they felt this way in a yoga class, and they thought that it was wrong and that it wasn't okay. And like, no, you just need the right outlet for it. And there is so much space for transformation just in like having I feel like we offer folks the chance to have like hopefully like a healthy communicative relationship where they're communicating about their needs, maybe that they've never shared with anyone else, and
Mm-hmm.
you're able to like kind of guide them into the like facilitation of having those needs met. And I think that
Yeah,
that is like such a powerful and transformative thing that just extends, like my best sessions, my best play extends years beyond the like couple of hours that someone is spending with me.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
hope that that is, it's not, I wouldn't say like a goal, but like an outcome that I'm like really thrilled when that happens, when like
I
something
agree.
cracks
Yeah,
open in someone and they are changed in a way
yeah,
that like they haven't been able to move through on their
yeah.
own.
You know, that really resonates with me because me being Slavic and Ukrainian, I feel like a lot of the times in our communities, like you're not really allowed to stray from certain things. And you will be like somewhat shamed if you are seen as one way or another. And so I feel like people talk about BDSM a lot less. And whenever I'm on like FetLife, for example, and I'm like looking around and I see people from like literally the same city that I was born in, I'm like, oh my God, they exist. And it's like, of course they do. But whenever they talk to me, I'm really thankful, but I get a lot of messages from people in, you know, sometimes in Russian, Ukrainian, or in English, like people here or people there talking to me saying how like I've really opened up their mind and made them feel less shameful about their kinks. And I'm really thankful for that because I've had multiple like Ukrainian immigrants who I see as clients who I get to talk to them and I can relate to them on that level of like our community and how, yeah, you're not really allowed to be one way or another. And it's very frowned upon about men looking submissive. There's a lot of pride in Slavic culture, I think, for a man to be a provider, to be strong, all this. But at the same time, like the women are very, very strong like people in our households. Like I've always just assumed like matriarchy is the way to go because in my household, like it's the women you turn to. Like they're the ones when things are wrong. And it's like in my household, like my mother was the always the one that we would go to. She was the one who was seen as the strong, powerful figure. And I've always just seen women in my family be these very strong, beautiful people who can make this like femininity seems strong, which I feel like sometimes is diminished. And I love that. And so when I'm seeing this, I'm like, of course there are going to be men who are going to be submissive. You had this mother who was just like so dominating, and like I was like, and not to mention like me as an older sister, like I'm such a bully, like I always have been. And like when I see that in like our culture, I love that. It's really beautiful. So then when you see it kind of translate to the bedroom, like there will be some shame there. And I'm like, but why? I'm like, you're so used to having strong women around you. And sometimes, you know, it's a kink to put powerful, independent women like in their place. And obviously, like I hate that. But no, it's really lovely to just see the transformation with people and see them like move in that direction of like letting go of that and are able to understand like we can do all of these things. Like you don't have to be intrinsically one way or the other. Like it's
Feel like it's always such a gift to get to play with people who you have a shared background with. As a disabled, chronically ill um, Dom, I've found it really fulfilling to be able to play with other disabled folks and to be able to, you know, like say on my website that like I have access to a wheelchair accessible dungeon, and just, you know, living with like chronic pain has been really fundamental in my style of domination and like really shifted my relationship to pain and like how
yeah,
I give
right.
pain and how I like move people and guide people through pain. And I've found it really really lovely. Like I loved hearing you talk about like your background because I feel like it encourages people to reach out who might
Yeah,
not have, or who like see something in you that's like reflected back in them.
I agree.
And it's been just like so powerful for me when other disabled folks come for sessions and get to explore pain in like a more consensual way for people
Yeah,
who have chronic pain, and being able to like figure out what what works for them in their body that day
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than like what someone who is I assume someone who's able-bodied might be able to take. Like it's different for
Sure.
everyone, of course, but I think especially for folks who have chronic pain issues where their capacity might change day for day, I think it's been really really powerful to be able to like work with folks and also like give them that experience of domination without making them feel like I'm like handling them with kid gloves is something that
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
really excel at. Yeah, and I had this really lovely client who's probably my like longest term client who he has spina bifida and his caretakers actually booked a session for him with a woman who trained me to be a dom, and then when she retired I would do sessions with her and him, and then I started seeing him solo for like 8 years, and
Yeah.
it was just like a really beautiful relationship where like his caretakers would take him into the city, into the dungeon. I would go stay at his family's house and like do a session with him, and like just I don't know, being able to connect with him in that way. And like I was talking about, like so he has really brittle bones, and so his caretaker would show me like how to move his body in a way where I wouldn't injure him, but
Yeah.
and being able to like balance that with like making him feel something and like
Yeah.
really feel something like powerful and feel my power over him was such a like beautiful relationship. And he would go to this like really delicious altered state and like
Yeah.
come out of it and just like moved and transformed,
Yeah.
and like we'd like take our time like bringing him out of it. And I did this, I haven't thought about this in a while. I've written a little bit about it and had he liked to be photographed. We had like a documentary photographer come and take photos, which are just like really really lovely. And one of the photos that he took is I had this a friend who had this herb farm in upstate New York, and they had this like beautiful herbal garden in like the shape of a mandala.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got him in the middle of this space, and I had someone doing like trance drum work while we did this like full body mummification scene in the space.
Wow. That's
And
so beautiful.
it was so beautiful to be able to do that together, and I like
Yeah.
share an experience with him that was like completely out of where I feel like the world building and scene is so important. And like
Yes.
I
Yes.
think especially like as someone who like goes through like periods of their life where like I'm not really leaving the house much, like my
Yeah.
energy like ebbs and flows, like being able to build that world and like build up to an experience that is like so far out of the realm of your like daily reality with pain
Yeah.
has been for me like so moving and so important, that like element of fantasy to bring you like out of that space.
No, I agree. I also think, just in general, some people, regardless of their background, might have a harder time approaching people. And then the second that they realize that you have something that connects, makes them more likely to reach out.
Yeah.
Or if I do talk about like how I've seen a client with a disability that's the same as theirs, or I've just seen other clients with disabilities, like I think it makes them feel much more comforted, and it can be the reason why they approach, especially if it's like a little seed that's been planted in their mind and they've wanted to approach. So something like that, it's really important, I think, to talk about these things. One, to destigmatize certain things, but then two, also to be able to just make people feel included, which can be sometimes difficult when you're working in an industry where you are aiming to reach the most amount of people as possible. um, and then so you're kind of just like making certain generalizations, or you are talking to people in a particular way. So it's really important to be mindful and inclusive.
Yeah, I like have language on my website that I like see all people like regardless of like
Yeah.
I was gonna say age, but over 18, like
Yes.
but regardless of like rage, race, gender, or ability status. And I've
Yeah.
had a lot of people who have contacted me because like that like really simple language is on my
Yeah.
website, and I just like that I say on my website that I have like access at like no additional cost to a wheelchair accessible play space. I think just it makes it seen. I also like have photos with people with different ability statuses. I have photos with queer people, and I think like specifically like my photos with queer folks have had like the most impact I've seen on like who reaches out to me of
I'm sure.
because like I also feel like just having been working for such a long time, like I remember like when my first fem sub, collared fem sub, was seeing me, she became like my photo bottom for so much of what I was doing because I was like, oh, like this is my personal submissive, like you're gonna be my photo bottom. And I just like didn't take a photo with a cis man for a while because none of them wanted to be photographed.
That's
And
true.
yeah, and so but then like so many queer people started seeing me to the point where like I didn't have a cis man seeing me for like 2 years. And I feel like that's not what you expect from
Yeah.
a professional dominatrix. And I remember so vividly someone commenting on one of my photos of me and my fem sub being like, this isn't femdom. Femdom is with a male submissive. And I'm like, first of all,
Wow.
yeah, like femdom mentions nothing about
Yeah.
a submissive. It's about the dom, you
Yeah.
idiot. And I was just like, but it just never occurred to me like
Yeah.
how people were receiving it, as well like in the negative way, as well as how many like women have reached out to me over the years. I think and like from talking to them, largely because for 2 years I took photos with this person.
Yeah. I mean, it really reminds me of how, like, I feel like a lot of people in this community will start to police it
Yeah.
for certain things. Like, I mean, Reddit is a good example of the way that they, like, you're not allowed to do this, you have to do this. And it's just so, like, one-sided. And we all know that people get into BDSM because of the subversion, because of the ability to, play with societal norms and flip the script. And so when I see someone being like, pegging is this, like it drives me insane. Or like femdom is this. And it really does drive me insane. I'm like, no, that's your fantasy of it. And that is what you want it to be for you. And that's fine. But
Also,
like,
pegging is fucking. I am fucking you. I
exactly.
am having sex with you and
Yes.
fucking you with
Yes.
a cock. I had this one submissive who was like, call it a strap on, call it a strap on. I'm like, no, mommy's fucking you with her cock. Like, I need you to know that this is a cock and that you are being fucked with a
Yeah.
cock. So get over
I do
what
that all the time.
you have
I
to
do.
get over.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I do it all the time. And the way that I frame that language has always been that. Because to me, we're fucking. We're
Yeah.
having sex. Or you, like, it feels like they're almost diminishing, like, what I'm doing. And that I'm fucking you.
Fucking hard.
Exactly. And like, what do you mean? Mommy's cock is in you. Like, you cannot sit here and tell me that I'm not fucking you. Like, it does really drive me insane.
Yeah.
And so changing that, like, language, like, because for a lot of the times, like, these kinds of acts were, like, only in the queer community, and like cis people were just like blinded to it and they had no idea. And so now it's like when you're incorporating BDSM, which I think, is very queer, then all of a sudden it's like no, you're not. Or like I've had a client of mine who is a virgin, who I remember at that time, it was like the third session I had with him, and he just like brought up, and this is how I found out he was a virgin. He was like, yeah, he's like, I'm just a virgin. I'm like, I fucked you in the ass 3 times. What do you mean you're a virgin? Like, what? And
Yeah,
he's
the
like,
construct of virgin is so. You're
I
like
agree.
backdoor virgin, maybe.
Yeah, and I'm like, he was like, well, you know what I mean. And I'm like, no, I don't. I fucked you. Like, and obviously there are firsts for every act that you could possibly do. But in my mind, I'm like, we had a connection here. Don't diminish it. Like, I did this very intimate thing. Like, I am fucking you. This thing, this silicone dildo has my energy in it, and I am fucking you. Like,
Yeah.
we are one.
My favorite is when horphobic doms are like, I don't have sex with my clients while they're like elbow deep in someone. And I'm
Yes.
like, I hate
Oh
to break it to you,
God. I hate
but
it too.
like, that's sex.
It drives me insane. And they're sitting here, it's like, oh, it's not sex. I'm like, you're telling me right now that that's not super intimate to me? Because I personally, there is nothing that I feel more connected than when I'm elbow deep in someone. Like, I absolutely love fisting because of that, like, intimacy. And I'm sitting here and, like, people are like, oh, well, I don't fuck them, so I'm better than that. I'm like, no, we're obviously we hate that, like, hierarchy,
Yeah.
just awful. But I'm like, there are just different ways to feel intimate with a submissive. It's like, and that doesn't make you intrinsically better or worse,
Yeah.
or, and right now there's a lot of that discourse talking about, like, pricing and things like that, on Twitter that I'm seeing right now. It's like, it doesn't matter what your rates are, it doesn't matter what services you provide. Like, at the end of the day, we're all sex workers, whether you want to admit it or not. And I I love that intimacy. Whether no one is penetrating and no one is touching anything of mine, or I am fucking them. Like, I don't care how that looks. Like, we are being intimate. Like, that is just what it is.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to talk, like, something that I'm really curious about. And if I had like all of the time in the world, this would be the research project. So I'm also a tech researcher.
Yeah.
And one of the research questions that I'm like super interested in is the way that payment processors mediate our sexuality and our desires, which I feel
Yeah.
like it's like we were talking about like the content that we want to make versus what we can actually sell, like what sells as like a market and what we literally can sell. And like here we are
Yeah.
talking about like fisting and pissing and like fluids
Yes.
and all of these different things that we can't sell
True.
on platforms. And like I think like I'm like, will this this get flagged because I just said the word
I,
piss? Like I don't know. I had like an audio note of me pissing without saying anything get flagged on one of the on one of the fan sites because
yeah.
I'm like, do you fucking employ like AI to tell it what a tinkle is? Like, uh,
Yeah, no, I have this conversation with so many people because I think about payment processors probably more than most people on this planet, but they feel like my number one enemy as a sex worker. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, this is the kind of art that I want to make. It's going to be beautiful. And I want to do this. And it's like versus the content I want to make. And then it's like me sitting here doing POV clips. Like, I am bored of that. Like, that is not what I want. And I have like so many notes in my notes app of like all the content that I want to make. And I'm sitting here like, I can't do that because where am I going to post it? Like,
yeah.
who am I going to send it to? And that does really drive me crazy because the censorship, like, it influences all of us, whether we think it or not. Because
Yeah.
you're sitting here on, some tube site watching this thing and it says stepmommy because
Yeah.
that
This
is
is
what the
my
algorithm is moving. And
did you
it's
file
because,
mother?
yes, it's like you can't, because you can't search this. I was
Yeah.
like, it doesn't matter whether you're a sex worker or you're a civ, like, it is impacting you because these payment processors are going to affect the content that we put out there. So it doesn't matter if you don't regularly consume sex workers' content. Like, you're sitting here on TikTok and you're seeing these people like censor certain words, and it's like now it's turned into, people talking about mommy, whatever, or daddy, and it's because they're not allowed to possibly talk about
Mommy
other.
isn't flagged the same way Mistress is. And I think it's
Yeah.
something that's really interesting too, is one of the things I was noticing on TikTok was that underboob was such a trend that then moved into mainstream fashion, but was first on TikTok
Yeah.
because people with titties, cleavage was getting flagged in
Yes.
the automated content moderation system. And I think that it's like so interesting to see like how it shifts
Yeah.
desire and like
Yeah.
both like how cultural things shift desire. And I'm curious of like pandemic as mediating factor, bringing more people into blood play and mommy play because both are like deep forms of intimacy and closeness. And
Yes.
like I'm still largely not doing things. Like a lot of people have like a year and a half of like touch deprivation and
Yes.
like intimacy deprivation. And like those are two like deeply intimate activities. At the start of the pandemic, I was like, I am so curious, like 10 years from now, like what people are going to be into right now.
Yeah.
And like it seems like it's bug chasing.
Yeah. I think people really underestimate our impact. Like I really do. And they don't understand like how deep it is rooted because so many of these policies in terms of service are so homophobic that
Yeah.
it's like, okay, cool. What's the loophole here? And at the same time, they want us on there because we drive so
Yeah.
many views. And so it's like we're constantly adapting to these new terms of service and the guidelines that they provide us, that it gets to the point where, I mean, so many people making content happen to be sex workers because we need to be promoting our content. So you're seeing them start trends because it's like, how can I do this in a different way? And then someone else takes it. And because we are censoring ourselves,
Right.
someone else who maybe isn't in the industry sees this and thinks it's cool, and then they start to do it, not even realizing that
It comes in.
actually it's a euphemism, or
Yeah.
actually it's a sex worker trying to approach things in a little bit more like, publicly acceptable way. And so it's really interesting how I think people are so blind to it, but I'm like, no, that mommy porn that you love,
Yeah.
it's because of these payment processors and because of the way that we are, trying to move things. But at the same time, like, I'm totally mommy, and like that would be regardless.
It's so interesting to me, which I don't, I'm like, should I even say this? Because I don't want it to change. Like, I never want to be your stepmommy, but like, mommy doesn't get flagged, mommy and daddy don't get flagged the same way as like more incest porn, where like you're playing with like stepmommy, stepmother, stepfather, which I think is interesting. And I don't know,
Yeah.
I think that there is so much. And like what I'm hearing you talk about is this continual evolution that sex workers have to do in
Yeah.
order to stay on a platform and to do their best to stay visible. And it is like this constant dance. I consider it's like platform policing and like criminalization like go hand in hand. So it's like this dance around criminalization to, and like you see it happening like on the streets too, to avoid policing, like the trends in fashion, like like when I was in Germany 10 years ago, like all of the sex workers were wearing fanny packs, and like I was there with my mom and my mom's like, oh my god, their outfits are so cute, and I'm like, good mom, that's whore, like I like you should pay
Yeah.
her. But like she was like so into their fashion style, and I'm like, that's so that like nothing is visible and they can like keep their money there, and I think like it has changed fashion on the streets based on what you're wearing and like how you're being policed,
Yeah.
like what you can wear. And then it the same thing happens in online spaces. We actually have a really interesting resource on hacking hustling where we kind of it's called Trains Tits and Technology, where we have like a bunch of different speakers come in and talk about like the use of money in like 1920s and like what happened when like the railroads went out west, and like sex workers kind of like uh were some of the first people to go out west because
Yeah.
workers there, and how sex work has just been so integral in shaping society in this way that is so largely invisibilized. And I think about it so much with payment processors. Like
Yeah.
I would love to make like bloody content, but I get shadow banned and I can't sell it anywhere. Like I love
Exactly.
talking about executrix, I can't even say the word, clips where like like, do you live or do you die? Like, there's only one way to find out. Like, what's hotter, like, than edge play than that? And like,
Yeah.
no
Yes.
one's endangered in this
No, I
situation.
agree.
And it's like all, sorry, I'm on a rant now. It's like all under the like guise of protecting children, which
Yes.
does
Yes.
nothing to do that. And like, this is like my most firmly held belief. Like, if you want to protect the children, like, abolish families. Like 90% of like child abuse happens in like a white picket fence home. Like,
Sure.
and I just think like it is so It's obviously misguided because the real
Yeah.
intent is to persecute like queer people and gender non-conforming
Yeah. But
people.
we end up being some of the first people to adapt any new kind of technology, or like you're saying, all of a sudden there's a new railroad. Of course, the first people who are going to go there are sex workers. We
Right.
tend to always be adopting like the first technology, but we also are the first ones to experience its downfalls. Always. And then you hear sex workers screaming from the rooftops talking about like AI, like, hey, like a lot of this is being used improperly, or deep fakes, or hey, these social medias are tracking you. Like, and we're starting to, you hear them from other people and people just ignore us. And it's like, you've hear like it also comes back to like, for example, the stripper index, when they were talking about that. Like, of course, sex workers feel the impacts of the economy first, because where else do people cut money? So for me, I'm constantly thinking about things like this. Like, we are the first people to, adopt new things because we want it to work. And also we're the first people to feel the effects of something negative. And it just, I think about things like that all of the time. And I'm sure you do. And anybody else who's in the industry long enough, you see the way that it impacts us, and also starts to impact other people, and them not even realizing it's impacting
Yeah. Yeah,
themselves.
I think that like other people not even realizing that it's impacting them until it's like very suddenly
Yeah.
like not able to access these things, and like it's how fascism works too.
Yeah.
It like like with all of the laws that we're seeing in our country, they are I saw like this tweet the other day about like the book censorship, and like one of the books that they're like trying to like get taken out of libraries is a book about sexual health that talks about sexual abuse. And the tweet was about how the librarian had a 10-year-old who like pointed at it and was like, that's me. And the librarian was able to like talk to her mother about it, and like they were able to like get the child out of that situation. And like that is what they're trying to prevent. Like it's
Yeah.
not about, it is not about, the anti-sex rhetoric is not really about sex. It is
Yeah.
about repression and suppression
Yeah.
and like the growing rise of fascism, and it
Yeah.
always starts with sex and gender.
True. And it does drive me really crazy whenever I hear anything about sex education, or abolishing sex education, or just not providing people with the right resources. Like, obviously people are going to feel more helpless, and easier to manipulate someone who doesn't have the right words to communicate like what they're experiencing and what they want. And I really hate when I'm starting to hear, that the whole narrative is about protecting children and all of this. Like, it drives me insane. And I just, I don't understand how you can sit here and talk about how, like, oh, like, I want to do this or this to protect my children, when a lot of the times, like, it's the same people who aren't even comfortable enough, like, having a sex conversation with your children. Like, it always gets to the point where it's like, I should be able to do that, but then they don't even properly educate the children that they want to be educating. Like, I feel for them. Like, it really does hurt, because in my household, like, we didn't shame sex. Like, and I think it's what made me such a sexually liberal person. Like, it came from the fact that, like, I'm European, and we talk about sex openly in a very healthy way. And, we're never like crossing any weird boundaries, but like, and to this day, like, I can still go to my parents and be like, hey, I feel like this thing is going wrong. Like, is
Yeah.
this normal? Is this normal? Is it genetic? Like, am I okay here? And I love being able to have that conversation. And like, it's also how you're able to like help, prevent things like pregnancy. Like, if you're sitting here and never talking about sex with your child, and then some other, little horny boy, and someone like some horny boy who's older takes advantage of someone because they didn't even know what they're getting themselves into, like, that's terrifying. Like, why are you not, you know educating the people that you love about these things? Because they're the worst that happen. Like, you just need to make sure that you are protecting your people, and the only way to do that is by telling them, like, hey, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Like, there are bad people out there, and I want to make sure that you're safe. And you can't do that if you're shutting everyone up. And if you're not saying it and other people are saying it, then you need to let them speak. Like, I don't understand how you can have this much censorship. Like,
education and like multiple adults in your life,
yeah, yes,
who you can talk to openly about these things is what keeps people safe,
yeah,
not taking away those resources. And I think
100%.
also like a large part of it is intergenerational relationships are so integral and crucial to queer relationships. So many young queer folks, especially like rural queer folks, grow up like not really seeing a ton of queer people around them, and
Mhm.
like learn their history. They learn about transition. They learn about staying safe. They learn about safer
Yeah,
sex. They learn about community and
yes,
like their
yes,
history from these intergenerational relationships. And that is also what's being targeted. And those relationships are so often what keep people safe. Like if
yeah,
you're out of your family, of
yes,
your like, nuclear
yeah,
family
yeah,
for your gender identity or your sexuality,
yeah,
like it is going to largely be like other queer people, and often like queer people of different ages who like come swoop in and take care of you. I feel
yeah.
like we really went off on like a fascism on a fascism rant here. And the last thing I'll say about fascism is like our Nazis don't even have good boots, and it's very upsetting about American Nazis. They need to get some better boots so there's something to fetishize, because the khaki pants are not cutting it for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm so grateful for this community. It's why I joined, honestly. And when I think about the things that you're talking about, like, I'm just really lucky that, like, growing up, I was raised by a million people, literally in a village. Like,
Yeah.
I saw my whole family all of the time, like, extended family most days. And then growing up, and then, coming to America, and then starting sex work and finding this community, like, those two communities mean the world to me.
Yeah.
And I do feel very, very sad for people who don't have access to communities, because they mean the world to me. Like, they mean so much. Like, it is what I hold so near and dear to my heart, is my family and my sex work community. And it's just, it's what educates us. It really does.
It is. And I think like one of my like hopes in like doing this project and this YouTube or podcast or whatever it turns into is like it like as a form of education. Like I don't really think of myself as an educator, but I think like community knowledge is such a powerful thing, and like
Yeah.
my opportunity to talk to so many different people, so many different sex workers about their unique experiences, I feel like becomes an archive of information for people to like go into and like see what works for them, what resonates for them, in a way where oftentimes many of these conversations are so private and hard to
Yeah.
access, and it's becoming increasingly difficult
Yeah.
to access. But I
I
do
agree.
I do want to end on a slightly sexier note, repression and fascism. And I'm curious if you have any fun scenes coming up that you're like looking forward to, or something like you would just like love to do that like hasn't come to fruition yet. Like fucking your
Well,
doppelganger. Fucking yourself.
I do think about that occasionally. Something that I keep thinking about is like any kind of wild porn that, like, I can post that is not too censored. But like, it's still like really wild, and it's like people haven't seen. And the thing that comes to my mind was, I had this idea. It's at the top of my list for like content ideas. And it's a Three Stooges clown domination porn.
Yes.
Okay. And I when I think of the Three Stooges, like, I imagine this like black and white, like no one's speaking, like almost kind of like dumb comedy. And then also at the same time, like, you are being dominated in a way. It's like, you know what I mean? You hit it and whoop, and I'm like, oh my God, like, left to bruise. Like, I love that. And I keep thinking about it, and I need to make it happen. But the thing is, it's like, I think about these things in like a high production kind of way, because I would want to make sure that, like, I really look like scary. Like, I really want to scare people, and I love fear play. So in
Yeah.
my mind, I keep thinking about this. It's on my mind. I also love the idea of making myself almost like hideous and then having this like gorgeous body. Like, I love both. And it's like, wait, why am I attracted to the scary person? Like, what tits? What's going on? I
So
love.
I saw a content maker I can't remember her name right now, but she does like amazing FX stuff.
Yeah.
And like she was talking about how much like hate jerking she gets to those clips where she has like this like horrible face and like amazing like bimbo body, and like I thought it was really funny. She's like, I didn't like I jerk off to like those the like hate comments, but I think it's so interesting. That sounds really really fun. I've been really really wanting to do more of like the clips that I did with Owen, because I feel like
Yeah.
so many like I don't do a lot of mainstream porn. I prefer to like have sex with people that I have sex with, that I'm friends with,
Yeah.
that I like feel comfortable with and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
have some sort of relationship with. So I never like got as into mainstream porn, but I most of my partners who are willing to be on camera right now are not cis men, and I've been really wanting to do more like gentle domination. Horrible horn going on. Okay. More like gentle domination videos and like really just like deeply seductive that like I think sex that could be vanilla sex is really interesting to me when the power
Yeah.
dynamic is so subtle, and that's what
Yeah.
first got me interested in kink and why it like took me so long to like find so long 18 to find the language for kink, was because I wasn't interested in like traditional femdom porn. I was
Mhm.
interested in seeing power dynamics. So like
Yes.
I loved the kinkier stuff. Like I loved Princess Donna's public humiliation stuff
Mhm.
because there was this like very apparent power dynamic that didn't feel
Yes.
so manufactured, because there was the dom, the submissive, and the public.
Yes.
Public. Um, and or I would watch like more vanilla scenes and just find the one where that power dynamic was relevant, and like you could tell like the woman was like taking her pleasure and
Yeah.
like using the
Yeah.
man, and it was like it was just like miles apart from like the like using a woman, just like
Yeah.
the like I could what's that kind of sex called, the jackrabbit sex that you're like, wow, that looks like horrible, that like is not like
Yeah.
what interests me, but like is what
No,
so much
yeah.
of
Yeah.
porn is. And I think I'm really interested right now in like the subtlety and seduction
Yeah.
that can take place with minimal. I'm like really into like low spoons domination of like how little can I do to make you the most fucked up. Like I love like a heavy like
I
bondage
love that.
scene, but it's like it's so psychological for me, and like
Yeah.
how can like I use my body as a weapon, my body
Yeah.
and my mind as a weapon, and like that's all that I need.
I feel totally the same. And it's exactly the kind of sex that I love to have and the sex that I have on my own. But like we've said, it is really hard to find men who are willing to be on camera and then also willing to be submissive.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like doing good.
We're all willing to be submissive. Off camera.
Yes, off camera they are.
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess if anyone out here is listening, we were looking for
We are looking. I would love to make that happen. Oh my God.
let's make that happen. Let's
Yeah.
put that out there.
Yeah, but everyone wants to be dominated by a hot woman, but the second you pull out a camera, it's like, oh, it's a whole thing.
It's like, mommy, no pictures. Well, it was so fun talking to you, and again,
Okay.
and like I feel like our conversations just get deeper and deeper each time. And I would love to know where can people find you?
I think the best place to find me is Mistress Dasha DASHA.com. And then if you type that /links, you'll find all my links. And then I think that's the best way to find me, the best way to contact me for sessions, the best way to find my porn if you don't want a session. Because I make both vanilla and fetish content because I'm just a horny person.
It's important to hit all of your markets.
Yes.
And if you want to find me, bluntlinks.com is where all of my links are. And right now I am on Twitter at Mistress Blunt. And no clue what my Instagram will be by the time this comes out. So Blunt Links really is the best place. I'm glad we both just have like a links page, because as we were talking about the rampant deplatforming.
Exactly. Easier. I can change that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, thank you so much for chatting with me. It was a pleasure.
Likewise.